Hey everyone. We hope everyone's staying safe and we're really happy that you've joined us today. My name is Lakshmi and I'll be hosting today's Q&A. As many of you know, Objective She is a community that fosters open communication and connections within the tech industry, specifically for women. We're a community that allows everyone to have the opportunity to learn and be inspired by industry leaders in tech who want to pay back to their community. This is a community that I'm dedicated to in my free time. I lead product management at Objective She, and I work as a software developer at Uber, where I help build the driver app. During 2020, we had a series of really fun and engaging events, including tech talks, working from home, productivity hacks, experience design, and a co-founder panel. And in case anyone missed any of these, we have all of them pre-recorded and available on our YouTube channel. And as a disclaimer, we will also be recording today's event, which should be available for viewing on YouTube. How today's event will work is that we'll get a chance to hear from our wonderful speaker, Jackie. I'll begin by moderating the discussion, and then towards the end, we'll open it up to Slido. We do have a Slido that will be posted in the chat below, so feel free to hop on over, leave your questions, upvote any questions that you see that you think are interesting there. And before we begin, we just wanted to call out that we will be muting everyone, but feel free to leave your videos on. And for today's Q&A, I've curated a list of questions that will help us explore and unlock areas of interest for both aspiring as well as seasoned product managers within the product community. Today's event is perfect for anyone looking to get a glimpse into the world of product, strengthen their product fundamentals, learn how to transition from their current 9 to 5 to a career in product, or just for anyone seeking any inspiration. So on that note, I'm thrilled to bring to you our very first event of 2021, Product Management 0 to 1 with Jackie. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, of course. We're so glad that you could make it and you're here to chat with us today. And I think it goes without saying, all your amazing work and contributions speaks volumes to itself. But we would love for you to give a quick introduction to our audience for anyone who's new to the realm of product.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Jackie Bavaro. I've been a PM at Microsoft, at Google, and at Asana, where I was the first PM and grew the team from just me to being a team of over 20 PMs. And I'm more well known though for the books that I've written. So I'm co-author on Cracking the PM Interview and my new gigantic Cracking the PM Career. Am I also on Twitter as @JackieBo? And if any of you want to follow me there, I'm in a little bit of a race with a friend to get to 10K first.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I think like we discussed, your journey has been super fascinating. You've worked and you've grown products, you've grown companies, you've even co-authored your recent book. And so before we deep dive into the questions that we had for today, I wanted to zoom out a bit and kind of get a glimpse into your career and your journey so far. What made you choose to be in product? And if it weren't for product, what would you be doing today?
Yeah. So before I'd ever heard of product management, I always thought that I would work some sort of regular office job, but I would know how to code on the side and I'd be writing scripts on the back end to be like supercharging my job and look like I was really good, but it was just the scripts doing it. So I didn't really know about product management. And I ended up in the role because I had a friend who said, you should apply to this internship. And I said, I can't be a manager. I'm a sophomore. And he said, you're not managing people. Just like go apply to the job now. And it was only through that interview that I learned what the job actually was.
And it's been no looking back since.
I love it. It's a perfect job for me.
Well, your first book, Cracking the PM Interview, was an absolute bestseller and was credited with helping level the playing field for PM talent. But you also just launched your new book and sequel, Cracking the PM Career. I would really love to understand what that inflection point was when you decided, I need to distill all these experiences and write a book, and what your journey towards that has been.
Yeah. So back when I was at Google and after Google, I always had people coming to me and saying, hey, I have a friend who's applying to Google. Can you talk to them about the interview process? And I'd be like, sure, of course, I'll help them out. I'll give them some tips. And after like 2 or 3 of these people, I was like, wait a second. If I'm like telling friends of friends all the tips of how to get a job at Google, that is just sort of perpetuating bias. It's like, what about all the people who don't have a friend of a friend at Google? So I was like, okay, anything I'm willing to tell somebody in person, I should be willing to put online. So I started a blog, started writing up all my secrets, and that's when Gail reached out to me and suggested writing a book. So that's how the first book came about. And the second book, that was several years ago. I think it was like 2013. And I've learned so much since then. And over that time, I had at one point someone came to me and said, "Hey, can we do a session on like surprising secrets of getting promoted at work?" And I was like, "There's no secrets." And then I started thinking about it and writing it down. And I was like, "Oh, there are so many secrets." And so I sort of had that same experience again, where I was like, there's just the stuff that I sort of struggled with early in my career, and it made sense over time. But all sorts of new people out there are kind of struggling with those same things, and I wanted to write down what I had learned to help more people.
That's amazing. Do you have any interesting anecdotes or meetings that really stood out to you when you were drafting your book that you fondly think back on?
Let's see. I talked to so many nice people, and it was really nice to get to meet people from all kinds of different roles. One of the ones that stood out to me was when I was talking to people, somebody who worked at a big bank, and he was talking about how hard it's like, how frustrating it is to do product management as a big bank, because there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of process, things move really slowly. But as he talked to me and sort of explaining the value behind this, it turned my view of this around. He's basically saying the reason there is all of this bureaucracy and process is because when you're dealing with someone's money, that's like one of the most important things in their life. And so even though it's a slower product process, the kind of impact and influence you can have and the way that you can really, really help somebody in their life is much, much larger in these regulated industries, because you're working on the things that matter the most.
That makes sense. And as you wrote the book and as you were, I guess, like you're evolving through the different chapters of the book, what was your last parting thought or your last few emotions as you closed it out?
I am so excited to get this book into the world. I was tweaking it until the last second. Every time now I have a new idea, I have to like go back onto Twitter and tweet it out. But yeah, I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I'm really thankful to my co-author, because there was a little bit of a point where I had gotten all the content, first draft of all the content out, and I read through it and I was like, this is boring, like this is like awful. And my co-author came through and like in every single chapter like was adding stories or asking for stories or helping us like turn it around. And when I read through it again, I was like, oh, this is like a page turner now. I'm not sure exactly what magic she did, but I was very thankful to her.
That's amazing. And I think while we're on this topic of like understanding what it is to be a product manager and what that career trajectory looks like, would really love to double click into your opinion and your idea behind what it takes to really start a product from nothing or from nascency and grow it from 0 to 1.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing, and especially at the stage where a product manager gets in, is that you have to launch your product. You have to actually like take this idea that you have and just be brave enough to get it in front of real customers. And that implies when you have a brand new product, and it also applies for any new feature or any new part of a product that you're doing. So, when I joined Asana, they had a small beta group going with a few hundred customers, and they had no launch plans at all. And they were like, I don't know, when do you think we're gonna be ready to launch? A few years from now? And I was like, we got to ship this thing. And there were a few things we needed to do first. We needed a mobile app. We needed to do a redesign. But the thing we needed like really to do is to focus on, until we get this in front of real customers, we're not going to get the kind of feedback that's going to help us spend our time in the right places.
Yeah, that's true. And I think like prioritizing what you want to make out of it and prioritizing your timeline along the way is key to any successful product or any successful launch. I guess we have a varied group of, as a product manager, you have various stakeholders that you interact with on a daily basis and even through that whole roadmap, product roadmap. I was wondering what if you had any tactical advice on sort of addressing micromanagement and being able to partner with your manager to align on your career goals.
Yeah. So, so a lot of people come to me and they talk to, they're complaining like, oh no, my boss micromanages me. And I take a possibly surprising approach, which is I tend to take the manager's side. In that I think the reason that most people get micromanaged is because they're not doing a good enough job of being proactive with their communication. So the unique thing about being a product manager is that most of the good work you do is happening somewhere where other people don't see it. It's, the good advice that you gave your designer when it was just the two of you, or like a smart behind the scenes thing that you did. So there's a template that I use to help you proactively communicate and show your autonomy and invite feedback in a way that sort of helps you grow and avoid micromanagement. So what this basically is three parts. You start with, here's the situation I'm facing. So like, oh, we just found out that there's been a migration error and it's going to affect the launch. And then the second part is, here's what I'm planning to do about it. So say like, okay, I took a look at it already. It doesn't look like there's any way we can work around this. The data really is wrong. And I know that we can't ship that way. So what I'm planning to do is set, this one team on looking for quick fixes, this other team fixing the underlying issue. And I'm going to communicate to all the stakeholders. And then the third part is, what do you think? How's that sound? Any other advice? And what that does is it lets you in a way like, it works for both good and bad news. It lets you show off the challenging situations you're facing, and it lets you show off how much of it you've managed to solve. And by proactively asking for like, what do you think? They can be like, sounds great, go ahead. Or they can say like, oh, you totally missed, like, oh, we actually have a process, like you need to go use this process over here for that. But because you came to them, it took a weight off their shoulders, so they didn't feel like they had to follow you around to learn about how things are going.
I love that. I think that feedback loop is so important, and that context makes all the difference. And I think another question that's something that's super relevant to both me and people in this community, and I think like top of mind right now, is that you are a successful woman product manager and you have made your mark in product. What is your advice to other both aspiring as well as seasoned product managers who are women and trying to move up that career ladder?
Yeah. So I think that product management, just like any job, is clearly a job that a woman can do. I think that one of the things that I found most challenging as I was growing was finding the right role models. And at first, I didn't quite understand why. Like, why is it so important to have a role model? But as a PM, we have a bunch of different roles we fill. One of them is we have to inspire people. We have to do these like talks and share a vision. Another thing we have to do is we have to tell people like, no, I'm not going to build the thing you want me to build. And sometimes you have to tell people like, you're wrong. So there's all these different sorts of things you have to do. And I find that a lot of the time, the way that that like a man might say that same thing doesn't quite work for me. So for example, like a lot of the men I admire are like incredibly charismatic and like a little bit reserved. And I'm not very reserved at all. So if I try to copy one of these like quiet and wise type, styles, it's never going to really work for me. But if I find somebody who I can copy who's like filled with enthusiasm and a little bit goofy, then that style can work for me. And so I found that for a lot of sort of phases of my career, the thing I needed to get to the next step was just like watch somebody who like was somewhat like me, like to do it, to be like, how do you say this? Like, what's the thing? How do you tell someone they're wrong? And then you start to like understand, like, when do they use humor? When do they put on a serious face,
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to continue, like, pull on that thread of how do you find the right mentor? And I think this is so important because for both people who are trying to make their way into product management, you're on the lookout for someone to help mentor you towards that right path. But also, if you are a product manager, I think mentorship is everything to steer you in the right direction and make sure that, you have that check every now and then to know that to take stock of where you are and where you want to be. And so in the product world, what does this look like? What does it mean?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's worked for me for role models and mentors is to not try to find like the one true mentor who's going to be perfect for everything, but to really look out into the world and have lots of role models and lots of mentors. So for example, when you're looking at role models, it can be like any meeting you go to at work, and maybe sit on some expert meetings if you don't get enough exposure, but you can just say, I like the way this one person handles this, I like the way that this one person handles this. And then you can reach out to people with like really targeted, questions to kind of get there. So uh, there's a really good article online called Networking for Introverts by Jules Walter. And he talks about this idea of sort of planting seeds and letting them grow slowly over time. So you don't go all in being like, hi there, will you be my mentor? That's not the way to do it. But instead, if if you were at a meeting with someone and you thought that they did a really great job of saying no, you could say like, you follow up and be like, I love the way you said no there. That's something I've been working on. Do you have any advice on, how did you learn to do that? Or some like very narrow, easy question. And now you've got like a tiny relationship with them. And next time you have a slightly larger ask for them. And then next time, maybe it's something that they have to write like a few sentences to reply. And then over time, maybe it's something that they'll hop on a call with you to discuss. So really growing those slowly over time.
Yeah, I love that. It's an organic relationship that naturally builds. And I think I'd heard this from someone at one point when I remember someone was saying, just like what you said, you don't go looking for a mentor. You kind of set yourself up for success if you have a board of mentors and people who are rooting for you and people who help you see what you don't see in yourself. And this is exactly in line with that. Um, and I think we have a lot of product managers who are in the mix today who are probably at that point in their career where they're thinking, okay, so I've done X, Y, and Z, and I was told that I would start by building a really great product, but I'm here, I've shipped it. What should I be doing to up level my career? What's next?
Nice, yeah. So I see the product management career as having three phases. So the first phase is shipping product, and that's when you get really, really good at shipping product. And first you learn it, then you know how, and now you can really excel at shipping products. But at some point in your career, getting better and better at shipping a product, and even if you're delighting people and hitting your goals, that's not enough to advance in your career, because the next phase of your career is different. And that is the place where product strategy becomes really important. So what I mean by product strategy is, setting a long-term vision for how your product can sort of change the world and win in the marketplace. And it doesn't have to be that you own an entire product, like an actual, like the full app, but just whatever part of the product you own, whatever section your team is responsible for, can you start planning ahead and saying, where do we want to get to? And then how do we work backwards to figure out how to get there? So that's product strategy. That's the third phase. And then there's more after that. So if you ever want to move into people management and leadership, it's not just getting better and better at product strategy. There's a whole new thing which comes up, which is organizational excellence. So this is building strong teams. And at that level, your job becomes a lot of recruiting people. And it's surprising. You're like, but it's a real important part of your job is, can you find the best candidates? And can you coach people and develop them, help them grow? Can you set up processes? A lot of PMs hate process, but that's, people manager, that's your job, is set up the processes that help your team move fast and get good results, as well as influencing the rest of the organization to make sure that the whole company's strategy is aligned and set up well so that the product can succeed inside of that bigger context.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important to look at it through different lenses based on which part of your career you're in. And I think to step back and look at the other end of the spectrum, we've constantly heard about how product is sort of that catch-22 where you're saying, I want to become a product manager. I want to get into this. But then you go look at the job and one of the requisites is you require X number of years of experience. And on the other hand, to be able to get that, you need this job and you're kind of stuck in that rut. What is your advice to anyone who's probably in this situation right now?
Yeah. So if you're not coming right out of school, because out of school, there's lots of new hire jobs, there's sort of two good ways to become a product manager. The first one is internal transfer. So if you are at the job, start talking to any PMs. If your company has PMs, talk to them, offer to is there anything that you can learn from them? Is there anything you can offer to take some of their work? And just find a way to start doing the job as it is today. And then you can ask for that role change, or you can ask for an internal transfer to the PM group. The second way is to go from a company that has good PM, that's known for having good PM best practices in any role that's sort of adjacent to product. And then in that case, you want to absorb as much as you can about how PM teams work. So maybe you're an engineer working with great PMs and you learn about, what's their product process? What templates do they use? How do they make decisions? What frameworks do they use? And then move from that company to a company that's smaller where you can bring your PM best practices with you. So even though you weren't a product manager here, they'll really value your experience at that larger company that knows how to get things done. Because a lot of these small companies are sort of teaching themselves everything. And so you having that experience can actually be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's true. I think just seeking opportunities around you is often the best way to start. Um, and to think about the current, I guess, scenario of where tech is, it's such a rapidly evolving landscape. Things are changing every couple of years. I think product in itself has evolved so much from being this role or function that people were trying to figure out to now where, people are a lot more aware and know what to do. And thanks to some of your the chapters in your previous book where you talk about how exactly to like crack this interview and what it means. I think people have gotten a better understanding of how to enter it. But what I'm trying to understand is that, for example, these tactics and strategies have evolved so much, and now we see PLG, which is product-led growth, proliferating through the community and tech community, where the product speaks for itself, and there's this concept of put your product out there and let people play with it and let people test it and get a sense of it. What is your take on
Well, yeah, I love some of the better new best practices that we're learning in the product community. So, when I was a brand new PM, we used to do all of our sort of work around these personas. So we had these, like, we actually had literal cardboard cutouts of, like, Donna, the 40 something mom who like likes to knit. And and they were very, very shallow, these personas. They were really just stereotypes of like 4 people in a family.
yeah.
And we would make all of our decisions based off of that, but that was the best practice at the time. And now, the way that people do so much more deep, user insight and building off of like behavioral profiles and really digging deep into who people are and validating ideas so much earlier, like really double checking. I think the whole world of a lot of these trends is towards validating earlier. So basically, the way that anything in this product lifecycle is going to go is you have an idea, whether it's an idea for the problem to go after or the solution for that or the technical way you're going to build it. And then you start going down that path. And at some point, you might find out that you're wrong. And the earlier you can find out that you're wrong and switch to something else or switch to something a little bit better or redirect a little bit, the better of a PM you are. The more that you'll save your team's time and be able to build better products. So I think that's the trend that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And I guess from a more personal level, as a product manager, what are some mistakes or pitfalls that you see product managers make? And then it takes them a bit to realize, and then they're always like, I wish I knew this earlier. It would have saved me so many wasted cycles.
Yeah. The most common mistake I see is sort of treating product management like it's a class in school. So having this, and it's usually very subconscious, but this idea that there's a right answer out there and your job is to find the right answer and to like do the framework right, and it'll lead you to the right answer. And now you get a check mark and an A+. And product management isn't like that. We are solving problems that no one's ever solved before. And so what that means is, first of all, that as a PM, it's your job to become the expert in your product. So you show up and you're like, everybody knows this product better than me. But whatever area you've been assigned, like people are too busy to like really investigate that. And so it really is up to you to learn new insights about the kind of customer you have and the kind of problem you're solving. And sometimes there are like straightforward, like there's an obvious, easy way to solve something. But especially as you advance, there aren't right answers. Like you come up with 2 possible solutions and they both have pros and cons. And that's not failure as a PM. That's like, great. Now you have to grapple with the trade-offs. Now you need to think about, well, what are our principles or our values or our goals? What are our assumptions? And in which case would option A be better? In which case would option B be better? And which of those do we think is the case that we're in right now?
Yeah, I think that taking stock at every point and cross-checking that you are working towards that same goal makes such a big difference. And one like question I think that most people have when they're trying to either decide where they are in their career or where they want to be is this constant evaluation of what does it mean to grow a product or work on a product in a small company versus so a startup versus a larger established company that probably has well-defined roles and processes. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So what I actually have like an answer to this, which is that like I think that there is actually like I mean this doesn't apply to everybody, but I think that generally what works well for a PM's career is to start off at a company that does product management well, where you can absorb these best practices. Um, and that's because if you go anywhere else, you're just going to be, reinventing the wheel and you won't be necessarily growing quite as fast. And maybe you get a chance to like join the best possible ever startup and like, yes, go for it if you really believe in it. But if you're just not quite sure, I think joining a big company with well-established processes, great way to start. Then once you really kind of have the hang of being a PM and you feel like you understand best practices, I think it's useful to move to a fast growing company. So it doesn't have to be like the smallest of small startups, but really one of these companies that is that's like taking off, that's like doubling their employee base every year. And the reason is because as the company grows, they're going to need people to fill these larger and larger roles. And the trust and credibility that you earn doing your job in your first few months or first year will give you the opportunity to take on bigger roles than you could get hired in from the outside. So if you want to grow as fast as possible, joining one of those fast growing companies just opens up these opportunities, and you have to kind of jump on them. You have to kind of be willing to say, yes, I'll help out. And sometimes it's a lot of times, when I was interviewing for people for the book, a lot of people said they had these great opportunities just because they like volunteered. They maybe took on something that was important for the company, even if it wasn't like flashy and wasn't the thing that everybody else thought would be like really impressive, but they just like focused on where the company needed them and where they could show value. And then once you've worked at one of these fast growing companies, now you get to kind of see your career take off. Then I think is the time that it can be really helpful to sort of reevaluate what are your goals, what do you want to achieve? Are you more interested in working at, going from a big company to a small company, or going from a small company to a big company? And it's kind of fun that you can go either direction can be more meaningfully to you. You might also want to change the field you're working in because there's a type of problem that you're passionate about, like maybe social impact work or government work. And that's, I think at that time, you'll have so much valuable experience that you can really add a lot of value to any company you go to.
That's amazing. I think that's such actionable feedback because typically it's really hard to get a good concrete answer to that question. And I think this points people in a wonderful direction. And on that note, I guess, what are some practices or habits that you do on a regular basis to keep growing and improving as a product person?
Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely active on Twitter. It's been, of all the social networks, that's one where I see that it's pretty filled with product managers. And I've actually started curating a list. If you guys go to my profile, you can see it there. But see like what are people talking about and how are people analyzing like new products? So whenever there's a big new product that comes out, just thinking about like, what do they do well? Maybe you can talk about what do they do badly, but you don't want to spend too much time there because like you're not going to learn as much from what they do badly. Like, just don't do the bad stuff. But from the good stuff, there's sort of an infinite amount of good stuff that you can pull ideas from and be like, oh yeah, I would love to be a product that, generates demand by having exclusivity, or I'd love to be a product that that has like really good algorithms even before you've ever had to sign up. So there's lots of these like gems that you can pull, and they could be valuable to your own product. And then I love talking to other PMs and just I think that you talked a little bit earlier about mentoring and getting a mentor, but I think that one of the best ways to crystallize your own skills is to mentor other people, because a lot of times you sort of muddled your way through learning something and you know it, but until you explain it to someone else, you haven't crystallized like what your framework is. It hasn't really become concrete. And when you have to help someone else through it, now you really understand it deeply.
That's true. I think there's a lot of value in resharing what you've learned just as a test to yourself to see where you stand. And I guess on that note, what do you look for in a thriving product culture? What to you is important and what stands out as something that you think, yeah, if I started a company or if if I'm leading an organization, these are the things that would be really important for me to have.
That's a good question. So I think one of the things that's really important to me is a good relationship between the different departments at a company. So I've seen a lot of companies where like PMs and like salespeople, for example, are very like head to head, and kind of each person thinks the other person is like kind of evil or wrong in some way. And I was really, really lucky at Asana that we had this really close relationship, and I felt like we understood each other's goals, and bit by bit we had to understand how the other side worked, because there's a lot of sort of nuances in how the day-to-day of our job gets done that's surprising to the other person. But I think that when you have that good strong relationship and you really feel like everybody at the company is working together towards a shared mission, um, then I think it builds up this trust, and I think that to me is really important.
Yeah, I think that dynamic it takes the weight off your shoulder for so many other things and just makes the process so much simpler. The next question I had was kind of more lighthearted and more fun. Was what are some new things that you have picked up during quarantine that has now become a part of your regular routine?
Oh, geez, what's my new stuff in quarantine? Um, let's see. I spent quite a while homeschooling my kid while his school was closed, and he learned how to read, which was nice. Oh, I guess jigsaw puzzles has to be the answer. You can see I've like got some hanging on my wall here. I've got another one
Oh,
over
that's
there.
amazing.
We've been doing our jigsaw puzzles, and I've got like 8 more in this room.
That's so fascinating. Have you been doing it with your kid, or these are jigsaws that you've been?
Some of them I can get him to do, but it's more me and my husband. The ones that he does best on is if he has like 20 pieces that are clearly of the same spot, he can stick with it. But when he sees like 500 pieces all scattered, it's a little overwhelming.
It's quite daunting. Um, a question that I think is something that is very important to me, and I think a lot of people also wondering, has there been a woman in your life, or a figure in your life that you look back on and you think, yeah, they have been instrumental to who I am today, and what my career has looked like and what my professional life has looked like?
Yeah, I mean, so many. I mean, I guess I would have to probably say my co-author, Gail Ackman McDowell. She's amazing, and I wouldn't have started writing if it weren't for her.
That's amazing. And you've co-authored 2 books, not just one now.
Yeah.
And for people watching, it did launch and now is available on Amazon. So if you're interested, you should check it out. I do want to be mindful of the fact that we do have questions on Slido. So I'm going to wrap this one up with the last question. Um, to you, what impact does DNI have when you're building or growing a product?
Yeah. So I think, let's see, a few different ways. I think one of the ways is obviously like in building a strong team, right? If you know the book like Moneyball, it's about how like the Oakland A's were able to, with not so much money, be able to like build one of the best baseball teams because they realized what really mattered to be a good baseball player. And it wasn't that you were like slim and fit and looked like a baseball player. It was like, how often do you strike out or not strike out? And I think about recruiting a little bit in the same way, is that I think a lot of people look for like, do you look like a PM that I already know? And they're missing out on so many talented people. And for anybody out there who's involved in recruiting, I think the most important thing for recruiting a more diverse team is to at the very, very top level source from diverse sources. So that means like go to HBCUs and ask anybody if they want to apply to your school. Go to, women in engineering groups and ask if anybody wants to apply to your company. I think just opening it up broadly and encouraging people to apply to your company, people from different backgrounds who might think they don't belong at your company, that makes a huge difference. And then you're actually able to start seeing all of these qualified candidates. So I'm a huge proponent of diversity in recruiting. When it comes to the product, I think it's important, depending on which product you have a lot of different users, and learning about the way that different users think about your product can be really important. So I do think that having sort of a broad and open mind about who your customers might be and what kinds of challenges they might face with your product, I think can be really important. And sometimes it happens in these funny ways. I know for a long time at Asana, we were a little bit bullheaded. We used to have our like button used to be a heart. And we were like, hearts, hearts, hearts. And so many people wrote in and complained about it. And they were like, that's weird and unprofessional. Like, I don't want to send a heart to my coworker. And we were just kind of like, oh, you are stodgy and we don't care about you. But after a certain amount of time, we realized that their complaints were real complaints, and it was important to pay attention to all of our types of customers and not just exclude some of our customers based on sort of our own values of how much you should be willing to like send a heart to your coworker.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that awareness is so important and drives so many really important, crucial conversations that we just miss because we aren't self-aware or aren't aware about these things. I'm going to hop over to Slido. It looks like we have a bunch of questions, so I'd love to get through them. One of the most popular ones we see is someone asks, what activities or studies should I pursue to land a role in product management in tech right out of college?
Yeah. So if you're still an undergrad and you have an opportunity to add computer science as a major or a minor, I would say go for it, do it. Like, you don't need a CS background to become a great product manager, but it sure makes it easier. It'll sure bump your resume to the top of the stack. So I definitely recommend that. Other things that are helpful is anything that's showing leadership or excellence. So this might be that you have a side project that you started and like launched to the world. It could be that you're a leader in some club. It could be excellence in other ways, like a varsity sports team. Any of these things that are really showing off that you are the kind of person who can be the best at what you do. One other sort of, this isn't something that everybody agrees with, but I found that my undergraduate activity that was the most helpful for product management was debates. So I did a parliamentary debate in college. And what I really learned from that is how to listen to other people. Because so often you find like one person's arguing their side and the other person's arguing their side, and they never respond to each other. And you can only win a debate if you respond to the other person. So just learning how to listen, understand what someone's point is, and instead of just restating your own talking points, respond to what they said, I think is so critical in product management too.
That's amazing. The next question we see is, do certifications help break into product management?
At this point in time, they do not seem to be helping.
All right, the next one we have. What are some defining lessons you've learned as a PM in your career journey?
Let's see, defining lessons. So definitely the idea of becoming the expert, and the idea of validating my ideas early. And I'd say that as I advanced, one of the most interesting things has been how much, I always know that you have to always bring it back to the goals, but I think that learning how much you have to repeat yourself and recommunicate and reconnect every piece of work that you and your team does to the goals has been this lesson that I sort of tend to learn again and again and again. Because as a PM, we are so focused on our goals and we spent all day thinking about them and we know our vision inside and out. But any other person on your team, they went in and they were doing some intensive coding for 3 hours. And when they lift their head up, like they forgot about the goals. It wasn't top of mind for them. And so just any amount of work you do to bring people back to the goals, it helps people feel motivated. It helps them motivated and inspired. And it helps them make good decisions along the way. Because so many, one of the PMs I really admire, I remember that every time someone on our team asked her a question of like, should we do A or B? Do we do this or that? She was able to answer 90% of the questions of, she's like, her team motto was maximize clarity. And she's like, well, which one helps maximize clarity? Which one helps maximize clarity? And I would watch her do this. And it was most of the questions that anyone on her team was going to ask her. The answer was which one maximizes clarity. And then pretty soon you see all the people on her team like asking themselves and then just being able to move on without needing any input from anyone else.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's just hopping the vision over and over to yourself until you align on that and realize that you're all working towards the same thing. Ara asks us, can you give us some advice on goal setting for your career as a product manager?
Nice. Yeah. So first I would say, don't be too hard on yourself if you don't have a goal when you're early in your career. I've had plenty of times when people are like, what's your goal? And I was like, I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't know where I want to be in 5 years. So then I'm like, I have to like make something up to tell you an answer. For a long time, my goal was just growing with the company. And that was like not the most illustrious goal, but it's just like, that was what I truly wanted. So I guess my recommendation would be, spend a little bit of time, reflecting. Make sure to spend time like once a year reflecting on your own, seeing like, are you happy? Like, are you achieving what you want to achieve? Is there something that you want to sort of dip your toes in and learn more about? So you're like, I just like a little bit of me wants to like maybe join a startup. Maybe I should talk to some people about what it's like to work at a startup. Or like, maybe I want to go into a general management role. Maybe I talk to some people about that. But you don't need to be too heavy on yourself about like needing to have a goal. It'll adjust as you go.
That absolutely makes sense. And then the next question we see is, what are the important qualities you'd look for in a PM while hiring?
So every company is going to have different things they need in a PM, because product management sort of fills the white space. So if they have very strong designers, they might need somebody who has like reasonable taste, but doesn't have to be the best at designing. Meanwhile, if their team is all junior designers, they're going to want much stronger design skills. But generally, when I'm hiring, the thing that's I think most important is that there are some mindsets that you can't teach someone once you hire them. Now, if you are a person, you can train yourself to have these mindsets, but it might take a really long time, and you have to really, really want it. So if you're a person, you can work on developing these, but I wouldn't, as a hiring manager, hire someone without them. So one of the ones that's really important to me is intellectual humility, which is also very closely related to a growth mindset. But basically, when I interview people, I want to know that they are willing to accept that they might not be right all the time. They might be right, but that they're willing to listen to other people and like honestly consider new information when it comes into them. Because that's, I think, really important for collaboration. Another one that I really look for product managers is product mindset. So that is this habit of always thinking about what your goals are and making decisions that connect to those goals. So the two opposites of that I see is project manager mindset. So that's when people say like, you tell me the goals and I'll achieve it for you. And then there's enthusiast mindset, which is people who are like, new technology, let's build that. And it's like, and both of those can be great. Like if you're a project manager, that's a great mindset to have. And a lot of founders are like enthusiasts. But for product managers, I think it's important to have that product mindset.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's super valuable advice, and it's so relevant regardless of what part of your career you're in. I think this one is a very classic, typical question, but what is your favorite product and why?
Yeah, people like to ask this one. So I don't like to give like a real tech answer because I don't want like a whole world of people who are now just using my product. They're like, that's my favorite product too. But there's one that I started using, a physical product recently. So my kid comes home from preschool with his work all stapled together. And he would come home and he would want me to I would take each page off from the staple like individually. And it was just like a lot of time. And I was like, oh, I would rather him do this on his own. But, I think about like a staple remover and there are these like, these like really sharp things. And I was like, well, I can't let a 5-year-old have a staple remover. But I looked online and I found this new staple remover that's, it's like plastic with like a very soft, like no sharp edges at all, just like a little round tip, and you slide it in and pop it up and it works, and a 5-year-old can do it. And what I love about this is that it's able to give him autonomy. So I'm able to say like, great, you can do your own staple removing. And it gives me free time because now I can be like, you go over there and I'll, come get me when you want me later.
I love that. It's such a clever, genuine favorite product. So this is another question from Anonymous that says, what's the lowest salary I should be willing to accept for a PM role in the Bay Area?
So there's a site called levels.fyi that I recommend for comparing salaries across different companies. It's mostly got the larger companies. Yeah.
Awesome. What type of technical experience or understanding would you say is most important for a PM?
Yeah. So the most important thing for a product manager is to not be afraid to ask questions and ask questions of your engineers to understand the technical side. So I've had many great PMs who work on my team who have no technical background at all, and many that also do. And what's really interesting is once you've been in the workforce for like 3 years, any technology that's out there is not going to be the same stuff that you were trained on. And so whether you have a technical background or not, you're going to have to ask a lot of questions. And people who have a technical background sometimes are a little braver because like, I know that the reason I have to ask the question isn't because I lack a CS degree, because I've got a CS degree, but somebody else might be like, oh, maybe if I had a CS degree, I should have known this. But don't be afraid. Find a friendly engineer, and also like you can frame your questions as like, oh, I'd love to learn this for myself. Like, what can I go look up to learn more about this? That'll often work well. But ask questions until you understand, why is this hard? Like what part of it makes it hard? Or like what are the user facing repercussions of these decisions? And I think that anyone, you don't need a CS background to be able to understand the answers to those questions. So don't be scared.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are your tips for someone who is undecided about breaking into product?
Let's see. If you're undecided about breaking a product, you probably won't like it. But so the top things that I see, reasons, a lot of people go from like engineering to PM and they hate it. And so the top things I see when people hate it, first of all, you're not creating stuff directly anymore, right? You don't get that satisfaction of like, I built this myself. You also don't get that like, that encouragement that you're doing things right. So like when you're writing code, you hit compile and it works and it does the thing it's supposed to do. And you're like, yes, good, I did it right. Whereas as a PM, you're just like behind the scenes influencing things. Maybe you write a spec, but the spec doesn't do anything on its own and it's not like correct. So there's it's a little bit more thankless. And it can be, and so you lose a lot of that, like, those good feelings. And then on top of that, as the PM, you're the person who is in charge of persuading everybody and motivating people and inspiring them, which means that your engineers and your designers are going to like make you defend your decisions and like argue with you over what they think is right. And you're like, great, I've convinced my team, we're all on board. And now the executives are going to question every one of your decisions. And it's their job to kind of poke holes in all the things that you did. So if you don't like having to like stand up and like, strike this correct balance between defending what you did, but also being open to their good feedback. That can be pretty unpleasant for some people. And then there's no really space to be a perfectionist as a PM. You can't be like, oh, I want to get this just right. I'm going to spend all my time working on this until it's perfect. As a PM, you're responsible for so many things that the best thing to do for your team is to prioritize the things you're going to work on, be like, okay, these are the 3 most important. And then say, actually, this one, I'm going to try to get done just right. But these other 2, I'm going to do at like 80% quality and it's embarrassing, but I've got to send it out into the world because if I spent any longer on it, I'd be taking precious time away from something else that'll help my team more.
Yeah, I think the questions you get about prioritization sometimes is not just about prioritizing parts of your product, but also prioritizing your work to determine what you actually want to work on and what is more important at that point. What kind of qualifications and qualities do you look for in a product manager versus senior product manager candidate when hiring?
Yeah, so that role from going from PM to senior PM, I'm looking for strategy, autonomy, and nuance. I just got an article coming out pretty soon on this that I got on top of my head. So strategy is, can you create this, vision, strategic framework, roadmap? Can you like figure out what it takes to win a market? Can you set goals correctly? And can you actually steer a team to achieve those? Autonomy is, can you do this all by yourself? Like if your manager's out of town for 2 weeks, can you make good decisions? Do you know what to do? Can you move things forward? And then nuance is really this idea of seeing the trade-offs and seeing the complexity in situations. So I think that like senior PMs will answer many questions with like, it depends. And it's not just like, oh, it depends and I'm done, but it's like, it depends. If you care more about, growing user growth, we might want to go this way. If you care more about revenue growth, we would go this way. If we need to optimize for the short term, we would do this. But if we have the luxury of optimizing for the long term, we should do this. Mm-hmm. So being able to see that nuance, I think, is one of the things that I see in senior PMs.
Given that product management is so vast and requires you to wear so many different hats, what are some skills to focus on while searching or prepping for a PM role?
What So definitely what I would say is it's going to obviously vary so much. I would say do some mock interviews and try to get a sense of which ones you're struggling with. That way you can spend more time there. Cause I think, each one of the different buckets is going to catch some people. And even if you do a mock interview with just another aspiring PM, it doesn't have to be with someone who has the job. You'll be able to get a good sense for it. And even being on both sides, being the person who does the interviewing, you'll also be able to get a better sense of what a good answer looks like.
Amazing. What advice do you have for someone without a lot of experience but willing to learn and be fit for the role?
I would say that, as much as you can absorb from other product managers that you can find, I think will be really helpful. So if you work with other PMs, if you're able to sit in on meetings that they go to, if you're able to read the specs that they write, offer to help them, I think that apprenticeship is one of the best ways to learn.
Um, uh, for this one, I always hear very different, interesting answers, but what is a PM's day-to-day like at work?
Yeah, so I like to answer this by sort of the stage of the product life cycle. So I think that in discovery, your day-to-day is going to be spending a lot more time with customers, researching competitive tools. When it comes to definition, you're going to be, writing up specs. You'll be probably pulling more numbers, doing a lot of like stakeholder discussions and trade-offs and really trying to get the strategy right. When you come to design, that's when you're like seeing new designs from your designer every day and taking things to usability studies. In the development stage, you're playing with the product every day, you're keeping stakeholders up to date. At delivery, you're like writing checklists and QAing everything and talking to your marketers and writing up blog posts. And then in debrief, you are reviewing all of the customer feedback that came in and looking at all the data and planning what you want to do next time. And pretty soon in your career, early on, you might do just one life cycle at a time, but pretty quickly in your career, you'll end up probably doing two. So you'll have like the current product that's in discovery and the current product that's in the delivery, closer to delivery. And you'll be having to kind of do both of those at the same time for two different products or features.
Amazing. Rishi says, I currently don't have a product designer at my company. What are some design fundamentals that PM should know? How do I communicate with product designers?
Nice. So like fundamentals, like there's the Nielsen usability heuristics, which is like a good thing you can look up. But I think that'll be kind of stale, like, or kind of dry, just looking at like the rules there. What I would say is just use a lot of great products, and you can work with other leaders at your company to figure out like what products do they think are great, or they're ones that they think are sort of role models for the product that you're building. And then, just use them, pay attention to what do you love, what do you not love. And there you can sort of build up that pattern recognition for what good design is like.
I think one question that we see coming out a lot is this notion of trying to understand what the actual jargon means. And I think this question is in line with that says, what is the relationship between the product owner and a product manager with respect to a particular product in any form?
Yeah, I got a few of these questions about product owner, and it's generally it's a little bit weird when the company splits up product owner and product manager. It's like, but if you're in that role, usually product owner is closer to the execution of things, maybe more of the delivery, and product manager is more responsible for the discovery side of things and the strategy parts of it. But the closer that those two roles can be, I think the better.
I think we're going to do one last question before we close out. And this one asks, any advice for managing a product that you don't use personally because it's designed for a very specific niche or profession? And how do you stay motivated and creative in that space?
Yeah. So I love when I see PMs find these creative ways to dog food their product. So like maybe your product is for truck drivers and you're not a truck driver, but like see if you can like create your alternate truck driver persona and like pretend to be it, and like once a day or once a week, like go in and use the app at like going through it as if though you were that kind of person. A lot of times the way you develop these kind of, because I think persona is the wrong word, but like talk to your customers, really, really get to know, what are their goals? What are their fears? How does their job work? What do they get promoted for? And and gather up those anecdotes, some of them will end up jumping out at you and you'll be like, oh, like I feel like it was, and I couldn't give a number to it, but it was probably like the 60th person I ever talked to at Asana. So it was like fairly early on, you know, it was at my time at Asana, but like not the earliest, where like we talked to one customer and the way they described onboarding people, just, I was like, oh, okay, I think I get it now. And so sometimes you know, the more you talk to customers, really get to know them, and then find some way to dog food it. It doesn't matter that you're not the real customer, you know, just pretend to be that kind of job, pretend to be that kind of person, and do walk through it, like wearing that hat.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think with this, we come to our last question. It's been so amazing having you and getting a chance to hear all your amazing nuggets of wisdom. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And also, we hope we left everyone who's watching energized and excited about your next PM gig. Don't forget to grab your copy of Cracking the PM Career, which is now available on Amazon. We will leave a link to it in the chat. And if you're new to Objective-She, feel free to learn more about our community and our upcoming events at objectiveshe.io. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter or connect with us if you'd like to become a volunteer, member, or speaker. Today's event will also be available on YouTube. So if you want to go back and watch it, it'll be available. And with that, I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. See ya.